Friends, I want to remind you of a homework assignment, which I gave you last week. The first homework assignment is actually for next week, which will be Trinity Sunday. It will be my last of 3 weeks with you, and Dr. Mark and Beth will come back from a vigorous European family vacation. And next week, Trinity Sunday, is all about the number 3 and the number 1. And what I asked of you for your homework is to look around this very sanctuary that we share as a church home and to consider how the engineers and the designers might have had the Trinity in mind when they put this church together for us, that we might share in it together as one family. So that's for next week. And today's assignment, which was to think about the child in you, we're going to talk about right now. Now, I'm here in my red tie, and you can't see them, but I'm here in my only pair of red socks. But friends, there will be no Easter eggs today. There's not going to be any Christmas gifts today, no Halloween candy, no Thanksgiving turkey. Today is an interesting feast day. There isn't going to be any 30% off on your red clothing day. But today at many churches, folks will wear their best red on this day of Pentecost. Now, one commentary that I read about Pentecost lifted up smartly and mentioned that Pentecost is the only feast day that hasn't been grabbed by our culture and consumerized. We don't sell it on a card. We don't put it on a bumper sticker. Well, maybe some of us do. We don't share it in the way that we share Easter and Christmas, the two big days that Christians turn out to church to share in God's love for each of us. So what is this day of Pentecost? What exactly is it? Why are we here sharing in it? Well, literally, it's day 50. It is 50 days after Passover in the Jewish tradition, a day called the Festival of Weeks, from which Pentecost comes. The Festival of Weeks in the Jewish tradition was one of the traveling days for Jews, one of 3. They traveled to temple in Jerusalem to celebrate the power of the seed of the harvest process, not the fruit, but the seed. Today, during the Festival of Weeks, Jews celebrate the importance of the voice and message of God in and through Torah. They celebrate the seed and the foundation of their faith. They celebrate the power of word and the central importance in their text of faith, and ours as well. They celebrate together through gathering. Now, I think part of the power of this Pentecost moment in Acts was this actual gathering itself. So we gather together today in many ways. Now, can we think of some modern day ways in which we gather together, in which we child together, in which our inner child is made to come alive together as we gather? We become little children. I'm going to name a few, and I would like you to think of a few. When we watch fireworks together, when we gather 1 million strong to watch a Cavs championship parade, when we get a couple hundred happy birthday wishes on Facebook, we gather as children. Now, I can imagine in July 1st, the weekend of the end of June and July 1st, that this upcoming U2 concert at the Browns Stadium is another moment in the spirit of Pentecost where many folks will come together from their individual lives to come together in a huge stadium and to share in one message as Bono slangs it out there with the best of them. It's going to be an interesting moment. The night before, New Kids on the Block, Boys to Men, and Paula Abdul will play at the Q. And for me, this is a serious throwback to my childhood, as all 3 of these were kind of making hits in the 80s and 90s. I won't be able to take full full fun in that as I have a wedding here at Old Stone Church, but I'm sure there are going to be many people grasping their inner child, going to New Kids on the Block that used to listen to them when they were young, going to U2 to hear the hit song of 1987, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, the song that was the #1 hit the week that my wife was born. And so it means a lot to me, and it will be the message at the wedding that I officiate on July 1st, that these two will come to this wonderful church, and they will gather in the front of our wonderful church, as so many people have, and they will have found what they are looking for, just as Bono is singing that we haven't found what we're looking for. It's going to be a great moment. I'm really looking forward to it. Now let's talk a minute about this homework assignment. I asked you to think about the child in you. It's fairly abstract. It's fairly wide open. And I'll just give you the take on this. I'm not actually looking for a specific answer. There will not be an answer at the end of today's sermon. The answer is an ongoing conversation about the child in each of us. Now, it is one homework assignment for everyone here, but just as Pentecost, it creates 100 or maybe even thousands of different languages and contexts that we all bring together here in this sanctuary and that we share in together. Now, it seems similar to me to this Pentecost moment in Acts, the tongues of fire and the language spoken individually, but that all were able to understand all of these languages. Now, I've wrestled with this. I don't know that it would make any sense for me to try and provide an accurate, contextual, and historical reading of the Pentecost moment. It must have been kind of like this preaching moment, kind of like you had to be there. For instance, I didn't write that, so if you ask me for my manuscript, you're never going to see what I just said. And it's hard for preachers who are asked for their manuscripts, who believe that what is shared happens somewhere right out in here, on a Sunday morning, between me, to be blessed to do this, and between you. And so when you ask for our manuscript, sometimes we didn't say half of what we wrote down, so that's one story that happened maybe a couple days ago. But the story that we share with you happens between us at this very moment. And I find that very special, and I find it extremely Pentecostal. And it's like talking about that great moment that you remember. You know, these moments, the sport moment. We've had a few here in Cleveland lately. The big concert that you went to when you were young that sticks with you to this day. Have you ever been in a room with a great speech? A great orator, a great human being that put it out there and that you still to this day remember each and every word? Or an event that has led a lasting impression on your heart? Now, maybe the gathering was a you had to be there kind of situation, that gathering as well. Now, I think that context is very important, but trying to unlock the exact feel of those early Christians at the original Pentecost might have been be a little futile. And I think it's best we tap into some things here and now in seeking the Spirit in and of our world. Friends, we Presbyterians, with our long history, are referred to out in the world of church as the frozen chosen. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. The frozen chosen. So that's a riff on Calvin's predestination, that we are elect, that we are the ones that will receive the holiest of holies one day. And frozen is a riff on the way that we go about our worship. It's a little bit of a joke, and it's thrown around in seminaries and at churches all around the world. But we, like our church, do things well, and we do it in order, and that is all okay. But this homework assignment that I have given you, this specific homework assignment, it has always been a central part of my theology, a central part, that in childing with one another, we will be closer to God. And when I ask you to think about your childhood, I am inherently asking you to think about the Spirit within you. How many times in Scripture did Jesus refer to the people around him as children, regardless of their actual physical age. Now, I'm asking you to consider setting aside the adulting for a minute and to think about your faith as a child would, maybe as we do up here in the children's messages. As adults, we sometimes want all the fruit. We want all the fruit without remembering the importance of the seed that created it. And if we don't understand something, then it is just easier sometimes to push it away, to force it out of our mental sphere, to intentionally ignore it. Now, faith doesn't necessarily work that way. It requires something of each and every one of us. And that begs me to ask the question, do we have any personal responsibility in being sealed in the Spirit of God? Signed, sealed, delivered. And back to this Stevie Wonder song, signed, sealed, and delivered. As Stevie sings a line in this song, I have seen a lot of things in this old world. And that is a great thing to have a vast amount of life experience. We all know the benefit of life's experiences. But another song lyric exposes the potential problem. And a friend of mine just lifted these lyrics up randomly on Facebook, and they spoke to me. And to me, that is the Pentecost, and that is the spirit of technology. It's a song made famous by Barbara Streisand, and it's the song that's called People, and it's from the show Funny Girl from Broadway. And the lyrics state, we're children needing other children, and yet letting a grown-up pride hide all the need inside, acting more like children than children. As God begs of us not to let the seed of spirit remain buried somewhere back in our childhood. We need to open our hearts to the child in each of us, that we might share the seeds we have been given. The question I have is, can we allow ourselves collectively as a church family to go there? Or will our pride sometimes get in the way? And I suggest that it probably will, and that isn't wrong. But I will ask again, can we allow ourselves collectively as a church to go there, to open up the stories of our childhood, our embedded theologies, and to share them together? I remember a time, though, when my pride got in the way, and it was recently. I am what you call a language phobe. I am scared of other languages and of learning them, and I am challenged by the very act of learning a second language. I have a really hard time learning languages, and to get a master's of divinity and to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA, you need to become ordained, you need to have studied 2 semesters of biblical Hebrew and 2 semesters of Koine Greek, both of which we would refer to as dead languages. Hebrew today looks a lot different. Greek today, spoken Greek today, looks radically different than Koine Greek. Now, I remember suffering through Greek my first year, and I did a little bit better in Hebrew. And these languages in our Acts scripture today, I can't help but think of the homework assignment that I gave you last week. You see, a children's ability to understand language develops much faster than their ability to speak it. And I sense in adults at times their ability to speak far surpasses their inner ability to understand their faith. Am I asking us to speak less? Kind of. And I need our inner child sometimes to catch up with this aging child in each of us when it comes to our faith. And I think this is what happened at the Festival of Weeks when the devout Jews sat listening to the myriad of languages around them. I think their inner child was released. It was freed. It opened, and the spirit of living water through language poured out. It was flowing. It was abundant. And I think they were able to shut off that single-minded, dogmatic path for just a minute to see that there is a greater path out there. There's a path that leads from every nation to one unified God. Many languages, but one Spirit. Many tongues lit by the burning spirit of togetherness. Speaking all languages, yet one great language. I gave you homework last week to think about your childhood. And in a strange turn of events, which is also Pentecostal and Spirit-driven, our own Reverend Chris, who wasn't even here last week, but must have been tapped into this day of Pentecost, this Spirit, this holy passion of sharing stories, told me one of her stories. And I won't share the whole story because it's hers to share. But she told me about a story of being in the 5th grade with a fellow classmate of hers. And they shared a French class together. And today Chris is married to this fellow classmate. And today they are overwhelmed by the amount of French that keeps coming back to them from 5th grade when they just knew each other as classmates. And I will tell you, folks, that is the Spirit in motion. And Chris blessed me with her story, and might I suggest that we bless each other with our childhood stories in the same manner. It was a true gift. It was a true gift from Chris, something that I needed that day. And I was blessed by these lyrics on Facebook. And I'm blessed each and every day to hear your stories. And it is a gift of Spirit. It is Pentecostal to share our stories. Now, there are many, many, many theories of language acquisition, which I will not get into. But I find it particularly interesting that God used languages. God used languages to express a point. Of all the theories, right or wrong, we know that, in general, languages are best learned when young. And I assume that these early Christians didn't have language classes. They didn't have the privilege of college courses like I had. They didn't have Rosetta Stone. They didn't have the internet in which to dive truly deep into this language of study. Now, what language do we share in here? Friends, I also struggled in languages at the University of Iowa many, many years ago. I struggled through Italian, and I failed it. And then I took a 2-semester class built into one to try to catch up, and I failed it. And I took another class of Italian, and I failed it. And being a classically trained singer, that's a problem. I failed German. I failed French. And I failed a semester of Spanish. Not once, but 3 times did I drop out of the University of Iowa. 3 times. Now, I never thought even once, even one time, to ask God for the Spirit to learn these languages. I never thought to ask God for the courage to obtain intellect. I know now that was a mistake. But the power of God in the Spirit, the Pentecostal movement, the acquisition of language is a Spirit-driven venture. And I would suggest that if you have childhood stories that maybe choke you up a little like mine just choked me up, I would ask you to lift that up to the Spirit of God, to let God work in and through that story, to share that story with other people, which is the power of God's love, in releasing the language, someone else can hold it for you and reciprocate one day. And as children of God, we are sealed in the Spirit early and through baptism. And through any other time, we have asked God to be close in our heart through prayer, through song, or through laughter. Friends, I just hope and pray that the seed of Spirit is not somewhere locked away in our childhood selves. Being sealed shut in the Spirit limits God's potential in this world. And I want you to continue to think about the child in each of you. Friends, it is okay to not understand every question that you're going to come up against. But God is asking us to reach. Remember when I told you that happens somewhere right out in here? I can't preach alone. I can't be up here by myself. It takes a loop. I give energy, I receive energy. I hope that you can give your stories to one another and that you might receive the energy of the Spirit back. It is a powerful thing when we share our stories, and I ask that we share them freely and share them abundantly and trust that the Spirit of the Lord will show us the way. Amen.